It's my first JuliaCon, so the global one at least. So I'm excited to share this cool project that we're working on. And yes, of course, if you're wondering, it is a jingle. It's Bestie, your best practices, friend. Uh, work in progress. Uh, so if you do have to leave early, I want to just give you the main takeaways for this package. It is a new template, as the name implies. It's focused on best practices, so we are trying to aggregate many best practices and put them into a package. It has a recommended and a minimum way of using it, so we aggregate the best practices and recommend that you use them, but you have a way of using just like the minimum amount of cool stuff. It's already more than the bare minimum, so see more for more information. And the main difference between this template and other Julia templates is that you can apply to existing packages. So you can use this in your project right now. It's not for new projects. And you can update your package with new versions of the template. So you keep track of the best practices being implemented. It is an evolving project, so we just kick-started it, put some stuff in it. If you want to like give some opinions on what should be there or not, or if you solve some error, please come be part of it. It is looking for new contributors, so please join. And I'll be here tomorrow for the hackathon, helping you set it up if you want, and hopefully gathering feedback from you. Okay, so I want to talk a bit about myself, because I like me. So I was a professor in Brazil in 2014 when I started Julia. So this is more focused on the Julia side of my experience. And I was leaving C++ and MATLAB, so that's why I chose Julia. In 2015, we started the Julia Smooth Optimizers organization. That was my research for many years, and that eventually became, I think, 50 plus packages. And so I felt the pains of managing many packages, especially when you have to update things that are really old. So I got some experience there. I just wanted to point out that I am also the creator of Geo, and probably gonna have to be deprecated now that Julia Up will be the main way to install Julia. And I do have a YouTube, so please like and subscribe, and looking at the camera. And so my life changed a lot when I became a research software engineer here in the Netherlands, at the Netherlands eScience Center. So I changed jobs, but I still wanted to work with Julia. It took a while to find a Julia project. And this Julia project came last year, which is the Tulipa Energy, or GitHub name for it. Yes, thank you. And Tulipa Energy has a special place here because it is one of the main reasons that we have this template. A bit about the Netherlands Design Center, also great motivation for this template. We have about 60 research software engineers. We are a not-for-profit institute. We essentially work with researchers from the whole Netherlands. They apply to work with us so they can get some kind of funding. So it's in-kind support. So they ask for help with their projects, and we have someone or a few people assigned to work with them. If you are researching in the Netherlands, please look at our website. You can apply. And our main goal is to empower research, so that has many ways of happening. So we have various projects. We work with various technologies. As I said before, it took a while to use Julia. We use C++ and Python a lot. But whatever you use in your project, please come talk to us. And our involvement simplified is to make things faster. That can be scaling or just finding out what you did wrong. Improving sustainability, which is a major point for this talk in particular. And sometimes we create new stuff or help you extend the stuff that you're doing. And at the Netherlands Design Center, we care a lot about the quality of your code. So we work with research software, but many of the things that we care about also apply to general software, although I think that for JuliaCon, research software is a big part of it, so it's nice to be here. And for us, this quality it goes hand in hand with the sustainability of your code. So when we think about research software and sustainability, we are worried about the software working a few years ahead. So normally you have a PhD, you do some stuff, and then you're going to do something else, maybe make money, and the code is left behind. So we want to help you during your PhD to make sure that the code will survive. These are a few of the things that we do at the Science Center related to software sustainability. And one of the projects that we started last year was the Tulipa project. It's an energy system optimization. And so they contacted us and they said, well, we are looking to make this new model and we want it to be open, maintainable, so we want to write a good code from the start because it's going to be used by many years, and long after the Science Center leaves the project, we want to make sure that people will know about it. So if you want to know more about Tulipa, we had a talk yesterday by Lauren, so you can see the recording. But the main idea is that we started the project thinking about the best practices. So we aggregated a few Julia best practices and a few non-Julia best practices, put them into the Tulipa repo, started doing our project, documented our process, how do we do branching, how do we use Git for stuff. And so eventually when we started creating other projects in the Tulipa Energy organization, we realized, well, we might as well create a template for this, and so that's the Bestie template. Okay, so starting the actual talk about the Bestie template. Julia is a great language for best practices. It already enforces and recommends many things. So if you try to register your package, you'll see that there are many requirements, and those are great. That's like a great way to start, like semantic versioning, and this like a recommendation for you to have documentation. And if you start your package new by the recommended way, which is using package templates, you have many good defaults already. Like you can start with a CI, for instance, which in many cases for research software is like, what is CI? Right? So it's pretty cool. And the community is very active, so there are always many things popping up. However, we should expect more best practices. First, because new ideas keep popping up, so we had some talks here. I do believe there are some talks going on around the morning about new best practices as well. New tooling that we want to adopt. And also, when the popularity of Julia increases, the number of tools will also increase, especially when people realize that they can make money by supporting Julia in some of these other code quality tools, services. And of course, when the adoption increases, you also expect some quality, especially from industry. We had a conversation yesterday about this. So you want to make sure that the code is secure, it doesn't have too many code smells, that kind of thing, right? So we should expect the tooling in Julia and the best practices to keep changing, to keep evolving. And so that's where Bestie comes in. We are aggregating these best practices. And since it can be applied to existing packages and reapplied, right, we are kind of solving this problem, which is if you use the template and the tooling changes, you can just get an update, and now you have the most up-to-date tooling. Okay? So from simple things like the tagbot versions changed, update. From, okay, now we're going to use Jet in the CI, update. Okay? Like I mentioned before, we are an evolving template, so there are many things happening. There are many issues. I think I have 50 open issues. And we are not the authority. So it's important to say that we are really, really, really interested in best practices at the Netherlands Science Center, but we are not saying that we have the power to say what are the best practices, but we do have opinions on that, and that's the template. Okay, so I'm going to compare a bit with the package templates, just a little bit. So I'm going to tell what is a project generator tool. So first, you have this tool, a project generator. It's going to send questions to the user. The user will answer these questions. It might be stored somewhere or not. And the project generator takes those questions, put them into the template, and create a package for you. Okay, that's the basics of project generation. Package templates is the project generator and the template. It uses Mustache internally for how it handles placeholder variables and other things. But the idea is that the package template is responsible to sending you the questions and then getting those answers and then putting it into the template and give you the package. Disclaimer, I don't know much about the package template, so you can correct me on this later. But that's from what I understood. So what we are doing at the Bestie template is we are not worried about the project generator itself. So we are using Copier, which is an external tool. It's a Python tool. We do have some wrapper around the questions. So because it's a Julia project and we know what a Julia project has or needs, we kind of do some stepping in to say, well, you have a project almost, so let me get a few things already for you, and then keep on. Right? Copier does the thing. We focus mostly on the template itself, so the Bestie part, and Copier uses Ginger, so that's also a small difference. Usually you don't have to care about these details, but the most important part is that we are the template and a very thin wrapper, so it's easy Julia code and easy to get inserted into, like to join the project and just look at the template folder and do something. Using Bestie template is really easy. So this is an animated GIF of the process. We're not going to go to the GIF, but it's like a few questions, and then you have a project. Just to show you the questions that you have to answer. So you have about 6 questions here. The project name is kind of guessed, UUID, and then some things that I'm not guessing but could be guessed. For some reason, I asked for the indentation length early. I don't want to talk about that now, but also opinions welcome. And then the most important part, I asked, how do you want to handle the optional questions? So what we say is the recommended way, which is using our defaults. So we add a bunch of stuff. Or you can say nothing, I want the minimum, so answer no to everything, right? You also have the option of being really precise and saying, I want this and not that. You can do that programmatically as well, or it's just answering a bunch of other questions. It is a bit more verbose because there are many options, but that's the main idea. So what is inside Bestie template? For version 0.8, which was released Monday. So we have these example repos if you want to actually check them out, the Bestie minimum and Bestie recommended. So I'm going to go over essentially what's inside Bestie minimum here. So first you have the basic Julia stuff, right? So you should know all of this. Except that we also have the answers. So how does Copier works? Keeps the answers, and that's it. So it just knows what you answer so you can update later. All the rest is pretty basic. Source has one file, test has run tests. Then you have formatting stuff. So in the minimum, we already put the formatting there. So Julia formatter, non-intrusive file, picked up by VS Code. You want to have that. And you have editor config, which is also a really non-intrusive file picked up by many editors. It has very, very little information, but if you send this to someone that doesn't have any editor, they open this on the server with VI, editor config is on the VI on the server, so it just works. Okay? At least NeoVim, I guess Vim as well. The other thing that we add there by default is citation.cff. Since most of our projects are research software, citation is really important to us. We want you to cite the software, not just the paper associated. So we have the citation file format that we are involved. And so citation.cff is a bit of a biased addition. You have the minimum information, and you can fill this up later. There is a link for the CFF init. So this is what happens if you add a citation.cff. GitHub picks it up, and then you can just click cite this repository, click on bibtag, and then you have a bibtag citation that you then just copy-paste. And as I mentioned, CFF init is a way to create your citation CFF. This is free advertising. Oh, of course, you also have the workflows. So the workflows are not an option. It's part of the minimum. You want to have these things there. It's mostly what you already know. So the main difference is that we have a lint here that I'll say a bit more later. And we have this reusable test because we separate your test from the test on the pull requests. So we made this choice to have tests on pull requests to be on a smaller matrix because testing on Windows 1.6 took twice as long as testing on Ubuntu latest. So let's test the PRs just on the really fast stuff. If it breaks, we fix it, but otherwise we just test the quick stuff. And of course, you should know compat helper, you should know about the docs, and you should know about tagbot. So talking about the docs, we have the docs. The docs are there. One big difference, or maybe small, we chose to have numbered files, not number file, numbered files, except for the index for building reasons. So when you add your new file, you say 10-intro 20-tutorial. This is picked up automatically, so the ordering of the pages is there. You don't have to touch make.jl, okay? So it's a bit easier to get started with the documentation. And we have this lychee.toml file, which is used in the link.yaml workflow that I mentioned before. It's a link checker. So if somewhere in your markdown files you put a link and it's broken, you're going to have a message in your pull request. So this is how the build looks like. You can run this locally. And finally, for the minimum options, you also have a pull request template. It's not really intrusive. I mean, when you create the pull request, you're going to have some markdown things already filled up. So, and if you just ignore that and press create, this is what's going to pop up, which is the list of related issues, and you fill nothing, closes something, and a checklist. We believe the checklist, just having this checklist, helps sustainability a bit, because the person creating the pull request will, okay, yeah, I forgot that docs should be there. Okay, so that's like a really non-intrusive file to have. Okay, then finally you have the recommended things. So this is inside Bestie Recommender if you want to check it out. These are a bit more intrusive, starting with what I think will change a lot the way you develop, which is pre-commit. Pre-commit has been adopted by a few packages. A few people have pre-commit. So for instance, you can see Julia Formatter is already here. It was maintained when we started pre-commit. And what pre-commit does is when you commit, right before that, it will run a bunch of checks, right? So if you have many tools, it will run all of these linter tools. It can run formatters. It can run other cool stuff. Like for instance, I want to check that I'm not committing to branch main. So if you want to avoid people from committing to main, start here, right? Of course, they have to install pre-commit, but that's something else. So talking about people ignoring pre-commit, we have a linked.yaml workflow. And if you choose to use the recommended things, the linter actually runs the pre-commit. So if people ignore the pre-commit and they make a mistake, online you will see in the pull request, it's failing because somebody forgot to do the thing. Okay? There is also a pre-commit update to update the versions of pre-commit. Maybe this will change with renovate. We'll see that later eventually. We also have on our recommended options the contribution docs. So one thing that we find very important is how to get people started. And we separate this in two parts. One is the contributing.md. This is normally in the root of many GitHub projects. But since Julia has a nice docs, let's just put it in the docs. So this is like, hey, you want to get involved? This is how you open an issue. Go here. No code. Just do these things. And then you have the developer documentation. Sometimes we call it readme.dev. The developer documentation has more critical information for you to start the project. For instance, this is how you install the dependencies. This is how you branch. This is how we name things. Depends on what you want to extend. But the basic already has a lot of stuff. The other thing that we are recommended is on the recognition of contributors. So it's pretty hard to recognize contributions. What we normally have is the contribution list from GitHub. This gives it a more a structured approach. So all contributors is a older project already. And what you do is install all contributors, the bot, and you can say when in a pull request or an issue, add all contributors, please add this person for this thing. So for code review, ideas, whatever. And it will create a pull request that will add the person to the README and the docs. So now in the README of your project and in the documentation main page, you have the contributors, which is pretty nice. It's a pretty nice way, not really intrusive, to add some recognition to the contributors, right? So one other thing that we have are the issue templates. These we feel are a bit more intrusive, so that's why it's recommended, not in the minimum. And the issue templates are essentially YAML files, and when somebody tries to create an issue, it's going to give a list based on that YAML file for the person to choose, and that essentially becomes a form on GitHub, and you can say this is required, and it makes your life a lot easier, especially for bug reports. You can ask for a reproduction, like a minimum working example of the bug, and it does help your project be more sustainable. Lastly, we also have a code of conduct, so which shows the code of conduct from contributor covenant. Still open to discussion whether we want to choose another one or not. This is a nice one to have. We had it in other projects, so opinions are welcome. So what is next for Bestie? Well, tomorrow, which is really next, you can join me, maybe hacking actually one of the issues, or you can just try it out, create a new repo, apply to your repo, give us feedback. It is evolving, so we are looking for more best practices. If you just say, hey, you're missing this new issue, that's a contribution, please do that. But if you really want to I want to go deep into why do we need this, let's create a discussion, let's code. We have a wish list, so in the future, we hope to have more tooling. For instance, one tooling that I was looking for was a docstring linter, and I could not find anything, although there were docstrings packages, no docstring linting. So it's still a bit of a mess how we structure our docstrings because, well, I'm going to have to check manually every pull request. So it would be ideal to have a linter for that as well, right? There is also some tentative auto-update. It's pretty hard to update these automatically because when you update, there might be conflicts. So what do you do with conflicts? Help is welcome. And finally, there is a discussion about maybe we should have some non-tooling best practices. So there's a lot of effort right now about how do you do Julia properly, right? So we have the modern workflow that was mentioned in the opening ceremony, the State of Julia. There are the Julia Kitchen in this afternoon, I think at 2, that has a bunch of Julia information. And I guess there are many more other initiatives going on. So maybe we join one of these and contribute to process as well. And that's it for me. I have stickers. If you want some stickers, please have some stickers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abel, for introducing to us your Bestie. And now maybe somebody has questions. Of course.
Thank you. It sounds super cool, especially the thing about that it can be updated, which PKG template doesn't do. Could you say a little bit more about this update process? How do you avoid sort of overwriting stuff that shouldn't be updated? If
Great question. Okay, this is working great. So what we do is essentially we use Copier for that. So the way that we handle things is we are lazy, so we mostly use existing things. Copier is responsible for the auto-update. And what Copier does is they use Git to check the last version that you have installed, the new version, and that patch is applied. We chose to not do any kind of commit with that. So essentially what you're going to have after an update is a modification of your Git workflow. So it's like you're going to review everything yourself, and decide what you want or not. Normally, README has some like overwriting that you don't want to keep, at least for the few first times, but otherwise, it's things that you want to overwrite. Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Yes, great tool. Thanks for the talk. I was wondering how customizable is the template? So, for example, if I'm working in an organization and not all of these questions on the template might apply, so how easy is it for me to customize that and to come up with my own template?
Great question as well. So there are two, I would say two parts of that. One is, let's say you want some of the existing things that are questions. So there is one of the fields on the generation or application of the template, which is the data. So the answers for what you want. So maybe you are in a company and say, okay, these are the questions that we want on the Bestie template. So always use this. So you import Bestie template, you import Bestie template internal, and then you say data equals Bestie template internal.data, something like that, right? So you always have the same answers. The second question would be, how can we add more? So that's a harder question. One thing that we are considering is we have some of these things, if they are public, right? If they are public, we have some of these things, and they are not part of the minimum or the recommended. So for instance, right now we have a serious file for FreeBSD testing. Julia's multi-optimizers uses that, so let's have that there. But it's not in nowhere's repo unless you explicitly add serious CI. So that's an option. If it's not public and you can't add to the template, I don't have an answer. So we can discuss that.
All right, I think we have room for one or two questions.
Yeah, thanks, Abel. As you know, I maintain PKG templates, and I also write the modern workflows blog. So in light of that, I think this is the best idea. What you're proposing, it makes so much more sense because it's adaptive. One thing that I wanted to ask is, how do you test it? The best way we came up with in PKG templates is compare the text files, and I'm not completely satisfied with that because we generate the text file ourselves, basically. So it's kind of a fake test. How do you do it?
So for now, we have two tests. One very simple, which is the actual, let's test generated template. It's just see what's generated, run the docs, does it build, and run the test, does it passes. And then the other test is we are testing that it's consistent with the copier itself. So if you ignore completely the package and just take the URL and say copier directly from your Python, you will have a template. So we are just testing consistency between what Copier generates and what Bestie generates. So we are thinking about, should we have like Bestie minimum, and then we always run the template and check every file. So it would be great to have your opinion on whether that would be a great idea or not. I mean, otherwise we don't have many more tests. So.
All right, I think that's it for questions. Thank you so much again.
Thank
and more questions during lunch, I guess.
Thank you so much.